All right, so we're diving into a movie that just won't go away, The Dark Knight. It's been, what, almost 20 years since this came out back in 2008? And somehow, in 2025, it feels even more like, relevant, I guess. How does that even happen?
Yeah, it really is kind of fascinating, huh? I mean, most superhero movies, you have fun with all the action, maybe think about the whole good versus evil thing for a bit, and then, like, you move on. But The Dark Knight, I don't know, it just, like, gets in your head and kind of stays there.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to unpack in this deep dive, right? Not just a simple review, but like going deeper, figuring out WHY this movie is still messing with us.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is, well, how Christopher Nolan made this whole superhero story feel so real, so, I don't know, terrifyingly real. Think about it. Back in '08, superhero movies were definitely getting big, but they were still pretty bright and shiny. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, totally. Lots of spandex, those quippy one liners, not exactly a whole lot of like gritty realism. And then, bam, The Dark Knight comes along. It's like, whoa, totally different animal.
Exactly. He took us to a Gotham City that felt like, I don't know, could be any big city struggling with crime and corruption. I mean, they filmed in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And he used very little CGI, tons of practical effects. Like, he really wanted us to believe in that world.
And he totally nailed it. Just that opening bank heist scene, right? It's like a masterclass in building tension. Those clown masks, the shotguns, the way the Joker just disappears with that pencil.
Oh, for sure. That scene really, like, sets the whole tone, right? You know right away this is not going to be some fun little superhero adventure.
Right.
And Heath Ledger as the Joker, he's just unsettling right from the start. And that rawness, it just carries through the whole film.
Oh, yeah, totally. And speaking of Ledger, let's talk about those performances for a minute because, wow, this whole cast is on fire. Christian Bale as Batman, so brooding, intense. He really captures that whole internal struggle.
Yeah, it's not just, like, playing dress up, right? Bale really gives us a Bruce Wayne who's, like, haunted, really driven, and always fighting with that darkness inside him.
And Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon, right? The one good cop in a city that feels like it's about to explode. You just instantly root for him. That weary but determined look in his eyes.
Oh, totally. He's like the anchor of sanity in a world that's totally spinning out of control. And Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, right? The White Knight, everyone's hope, and then that tragic fall.
Yeah, that line of his, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And that's not just a good quote. It's like the whole point of the film, right?
It really cuts to the core of what Nolan's exploring, right? That
Yeah.
thin line between good and evil, how power can corrupt you, the idea that even the best of us can break. Then turning into Two-Face, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
And it makes you think, like, could that actually happen in real life? Someone we admire, a leader, somebody we look up to, could they just snap and embrace their, like, dark side, especially now in 2025 with so much going on, all this uncertainty, all the division?
Yeah, it's a scary thought, for sure. But it's exactly why The Dark Knight still hits us so hard, right?
Right.
It taps into those basic fears like the fear of chaos, of losing control, of the world just falling apart around us.
And the Joker, he's like the poster child for that fear, right? He's not like
Oh,
those typical bad guys with a big evil plan. I don't know, he's more like an agent of chaos, just wants to tear everything down.
it wants to show us how fake order is, how weak our institutions are, the whole idea that civilization is, really fragile. Remember that
Yeah.
scene on the ferries? You've got regular people and these prisoners, and, like, either one could destroy the other.
Dude, that scene messed me up. It's like Nolan saying, hey, look, even normal people, when things get really bad, they can do terrible things. So, like, are we all basically good? Or are we all just one bad day away from becoming the Joker?
Man, that's a question that's even more relevant now, right? All the arguments on X, people fighting about whether the ends justify the means. It's like, what's right and wrong anymore? It's like we're living in Gotham City sometimes.
Which brings us back to Batman, right? Is he a symbol of hope, a good guy, or is he just playing the same game, just adding to all the violence he's trying to stop?
That's the main question, the dilemma at the heart of the film. And Nolan doesn't give us any easy answers. I mean, Batman's methods, they're brutal. He's not exactly following the law, is he? And he's always tempted to cross that line, to break his rule about killing.
It's like that whole idea from Kant, right? We have a duty to do what's right, even when it's hard. But the Joker's like, screw your rules. Makes you wonder if sometimes maybe the good guys have to bend the rules a little, especially when everything's at stake.
And that internal conflict, that back and forth between order and chaos, duty and revenge, that's what makes Batman so interesting. He's not some perfect superhero. He's like a deeply flawed guy trying to do the right thing in a world that's gone crazy.
And let's be real, that raspy Batman voice Bale does, which, some people didn't like back then, it kind of works here, adds to that whole, like, tormented, almost monstrous thing he's got going on.
Totally. It's a voice that, I don't know, you can hear the physical pain, the emotional pain. You can tell this whole crusade is costing him something, carrying all of Gotham's darkness like that.
And then you've got Michael Caine as Alfred, the ever-faithful butler, delivering lines like, "Some men just want to watch the world burn with, like, this quiet wisdom."
Oh, he's the voice of reason for
Yeah.
sure. The moral compass Batman so desperately needs, right? And speaking of memorable lines, we got to talk about Heath Ledger's Joker. I mean, why so serious has become like this pop culture thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's just one example of how amazing his performance is.
It's more than just acting, though, right? It's like he tapped into something really disturbing. That nervous energy, the creepy laugh, the way he just, like, loves chaos. It's both captivating and scary at the same time.
Ledger really went all in for this role. He, like, isolated himself, dove deep into the Joker's mind, and created something unforgettable. It's tragic that he's not with us anymore, but his performance, people will be talking about it forever.
And it's funny, some people say his Joker is, like, too over the top, that it almost, I don't know, takes you out of the realism Nolan was going for. What do you think? Does it work? Or does it hurt the movie?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll definitely come back to as we get deeper into The Dark Knight.
Mhm.
But for now, let's maybe shift gears a bit and talk about how Nolan brought this whole world to life because, man, the action in this movie is something else.
Yeah, but it's not just the acting and, the characters, it's the action too. The action in The Dark Knight is just, it's on another level.
It really is. And I think Nolan using all those practical effects is a big reason for that, right?
Mm.
You can really feel it, the impact of every punch, every explosion, like, every tire screeching.
Like that scene where they flipped the truck. I mean, forget CGI. They really flipped an 18-wheeler. I read somewhere that they used those huge IMAX cameras for a bunch of the stunts, which was pretty groundbreaking back in 2008.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you can totally tell the action scenes, they just have this weight, this grittiness that you just don't get with computers doing everything. It makes the danger feel so real, so visceral, like you almost want to flinch.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters, and during that chase scene with the bat pod, people were, like, gasping. It was like they were right there in the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what practical effects can do.
Yeah.
They pull you in, make you feel all that chaos and energy. It's like comparing a roller coaster to one of those VR simulations.
Yeah.
One is thrilling, and the other one is,
Mm.
well, it's interesting, but it's just not the same.
Speaking of interesting, I saw someone online saying they thought the ending of The Dark Knight was too neat. Like Batman taking the blame for what Harvey Dent did. It felt a little too easy, a little too convenient. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a pretty common thing people say. But honestly, I think it's actually one of the most brilliant parts of the whole film. Think about it, Batman. He's this symbol of order, of justice, and he chooses to. He chooses to become the bad guy, at least in the eyes of the public.
To protect Gotham's hope, even if it means, like, destroying his own reputation, becoming a fugitive?
Exactly. It's the ultimate sacrifice. And it really makes you think, what are we willing to give up for the greater good? Are there lines we just shouldn't cross, even if it means, letting the bad guys win? It's a real moral dilemma, and it's something we're still dealing with in 2025.
Yeah, it's not just some, like, comic book ending where everything gets wrapped up, right? It's like it reflects those tough decisions real-life leaders have to make, the compromises, the things they gotta accept to keep things from falling apart.
And the consequences of those choices,
Right.
the ripple effects that we're still feeling today. The Dark Knight, I mean, it's not just a superhero movie. It's like a commentary on power, on responsibility, on the sacrifices that come with trying to, I don't know, trying to hold on to a just world when it feels like everything's falling apart around you.
Yeah, that makes me think about the whole, like, light and darkness thing that runs through the whole movie. Visually, literally, Gotham is just so oppressive, like, it's suffocating.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Nolan is a master at playing with light and shadow. Like, think about that interrogation scene. Batman and the Joker in that bare room with that single light bulb, their faces, like, half in darkness.
So killing. It's like we're seeing the good and the evil inside them. Like, the potential for both light and darkness is in all of us.
And it's not just visual, right? It's the theme, too. Batman, always working in the shadows, fighting corruption, but always fighting those demons inside him, too. And the Joker, He embraces chaos. He loves it when things break down. And then you've got Harvey Dent, the symbol of hope, but he falls from grace. He becomes like a twisted reflection of all that darkness that's taking over Gotham.
It's like the city itself is another character, It's
Yeah.
reflecting all the turmoil and like the messed up morality of everyone living there.
Right. And Nolan uses all these mirrors, these reflections, to drive that point home. Think about when the Joker's putting on his makeup, his face all broken up in those shattered pieces of mirror. Or in the bank heist scene, they're all those Jokers. You don't know which one is real. It's like the characters themselves, they don't know what's true anymore, what's a lie.
You're right. I never noticed how many of those little visual things there are. It's like he's saying we're all a little broken, we're all capable of good and evil, and the choices we make decide which side wins. Just like those people on the ferries, right? They have to make this impossible choice. Do they trust each other or do they give in to fear and suspicion?
Yeah, and that's where The Dark Knight really gets interesting. It's not just like good versus evil, it's all the gray areas in between. It's
Yeah.
about the compromises we make, the lines we cross, what we're willing to sacrifice for something bigger than ourselves.
It's deep stuff, for sure, but that's what makes this film so much more than just a typical superhero movie. It stays with you, it makes you think, it even makes you question your own values, right?
Absolutely. And that brings us to another big question, another debate. Is The Dark Knight overrated? I mean, everyone puts it on those best of lists. It made, what, $1 billion? Does it deserve all that hype?
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. Hype can be a weird thing, right? Like something gets huge, everybody's going crazy for it, and then I don't know, a few years later you're like, "What was all that about?"
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I think The Dark Knight it's different. All that hype back in '08, it was real.
Yeah.
And it's like aged really well. The themes, the performances, all that, gritty realism, it all still works.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate a little. Some people say that, all the focus on Heath Ledger's Joker, it just kind of overshadows everything else. Like it's all about the bad guy and I don't know, the rest of the movie just fades away.
I mean, no question. Ledger's performance it's iconic, right? It's like a cultural phenomenon. He won an Oscar after, it's the kind of performance acting students will be studying forever.
But does that mean everything else suffers? I mean, Bale is great as Batman, Aaron Eckhart turning into Two-Face is like heartbreaking, and Gary Oldman as Gordon, he's like the moral center we all need.
Exactly. It's not just like the Joker show,
Yeah.
you know? The whole cast, the crew, everybody did incredible work. The writing is tight. The pacing is like perfect. The action is so intense. I mean, it all comes together to create something you'll never forget.
And visually, it's still stunning. The way Nolan plays with light and dark, using those IMAX cameras to get those huge shots of Gotham, it's beautiful to watch.
Oh, yeah. And we can't forget about the sound design, like the roar of the bat pod, that creepy laugh the Joker does, even the silence in some scenes. It all just adds to that feeling, like you're really immersed in this world.
It's a film that, it grabs all your senses. You're not just watching it, you're experiencing it. And that kind of brings us to another debate. Is the darkness, is it a good thing, or is it just too much? Some people think it's bleak, maybe even depressing.
Yeah, true. It's not exactly a feel-good movie,
Uh-huh.
but I think that darkness is like it's part of what makes it so powerful, right? It shows how complicated the world really is, the bad stuff that's out there, along with the good stuff, that potential for evil that's inside all of us.
It's like, think about how people don't trust the news anymore. They question everything they see online. Is that kind of what the Joker was talking about? Can we even believe anything anymore?
It's a crazy parallel, isn't it? And it just shows how relevant The Dark Knight still is. The world has changed so much since 2008, but those feelings, that anxiety, the uncertainty, it all feels even worse in 2025.
It's like Nolan, he understood something, like something fundamental about people, something that doesn't change even with all the technology and stuff. The fear of chaos, trying to keep things from falling apart, those choices we have to make when, I don't know, when there are no good answers.
And those choices, they matter. Just like Batman deciding to take the blame for Harvey Dent, sometimes we have to do things that are, really hard, even if it means sacrificing our reputation or sense of what's right, all for something bigger.
So, okay, is it a masterpiece? Is it overrated? Honestly, I think it's both. It's a movie that makes you argue, makes you think, makes you face those things about ourselves and the world that, maybe we don't want to see.
And in a world where there are like a zillion superhero movies, that's something special. The Dark Knight isn't just entertainment. It's an experience, something to talk about, something that shows us our own hopes and fears.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it in a while, you should definitely watch it again. Really pay attention to the little things, the symbolism, all the layers of meaning underneath.
Think about how those themes, how they connect to our world right now. Think about the choices we make, the things we fight for, and that darkness. That darkness that's always trying to get us.
Because The Dark Knight is so much more than just another superhero movie. It shows us who we are, who we could be, and how the choices we make, they really do shape the world.
It reminds us that even when things are bad, really bad, we still have a choice. We can choose hope, choose justice, choose to fight for a better world, even if it means losing everything.
And that's something worth remembering no matter what year it is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into The Dark Knight. We'd love to hear what you think, so jump into the conversation online and use hashtag DeepDiveDarkKnight.